and therefore they have to guess. So you have Niels Bohr's who guessed that there are such things as atoms and electrons, with electrons and protons and neutrons and this thing and that thing, at the basis of matter. But yet, after that, the wave theory of matter came about, because although Bohr's theoretical structure, basic structure of matter, makes sense in some ways, it doesn't explain everything, that every phenomenon that they're observing. So another theory came up of wave theory, or electromagnetic waves. And then there's a string theory, and then there's this theory, and there's another theory, because you're dealing with things that you can't see. Even with the most powerful microscopes, you can't see them. So we don't really understand what is the fundamental structure of matter. And we don't know the origin of matter. Like, for example, we see the Pacific Ocean. We know what water is made of, H2O. But where did all that H come from? Where did all that O come from? A huge amount of oxygen and hydrogen. Where did it all come from? So there's mysticism at whenever you try and go to the origin of things in the material world, and that mysticism is there in everything that we encounter. Like, for example, in mathematics, there's also mysticism. You have numbers like pi. You have numbers like the golden ratio. They're infinite numbers, and it's mind-boggling. And you have to use those numbers to solve problems. And then there are other numbers that are imaginary, like the square root of -1. But unless you use such numbers, such imaginary numbers, it's impossible to solve many problems in mathematics. So we see that there is always things pointing, whether it's in math, whether it's in physics, whether it's in any discipline, there's always something pointing to infinity and mysticism. Now, everything, but we all say that the human being is finite, and human experience is finite, and all forms in the material world are finite. Yes, that's true. But when you talk about the energy of creation, it's infinite. And it's mind-boggling, because we don't understand the origin of things. So this is explained here also, that there's a mystery about the human body. For example, we can observe a person right before they die. But as soon as they die, we see that something is missing, although the body is still there. What is missing? It's the consciousness in the body. While they're alive, they're conscious. As soon as they die, the consciousness is lost. So, is that consciousness something? Is it something produced by material combination or chemical combination? Answer is no. However, people theorize that it is, and that's just a theory. There's no science to back it up. If there was, then you could easily inject chemicals into a dead body and bring it back alive. But there's a mysterious element that eludes scientific research, and that's called the soul. We can see the effect of the soul. When the soul is present in the body is conscious. And then we can see another effect at death. When the soul leaves the body loses consciousness. So these things require help, because spiritual knowledge is beyond the ability of observation of human beings. We observe the effects of the presence of the soul, but we cannot observe the soul itself, because, according to the Vedas, it's 1/10,000th the tip of a hair. In other words, I can explain its dimension, 1/10,000th the tip of a hair. But if you try and actually slice a hair longitudinally 100 times, and then take 1/100th slice and try and slice that again 100 times to get 1/10,000th, you can't do it. And you can't see it. So, although one can explain something, and you can have a general idea of what it means, but when you try and actually do it, it's impossible to do. That's called mysticism. There's something that eludes our ability to see. Just like if there's a blind man, and he's walking down the street with a friend of his who has sight, and the friend says, "You know, the sun is shining wonderfully and brilliantly today," but the blind man says, "I don't believe it." And his friend said, "Well, how come?" He said, "Because I can't see it." Well, does that mean the sun is not shining because the blind man can't see it? That's ridiculous. In the same way, because the scientists cannot physically see the soul, they claim that it doesn't exist. But they can't physically see an atom, but they claim that it exists. You see, so scientists are the most irrational people in the world. They do not have a continuity of rationality. That's because they have a prejudice. Most scientists, there are some scientists that are honest, but most scientists are not honest. They have a prejudice. Their prejudice is they refuse to accept the existence of a superior being that's much more intelligent than them, and all they do is simply discover things that are already existing. And their only explanation for it is it all happened by accident. Well, there was one man, he's a French scientist who got the Nobel Prize. His name is Dr. Jacques Monod. He's no longer alive. He wrote a book once called Chance and Necessity. La chance et la nécessité in French. And in that book, his whole thesis was that there's no God, and creation happened by accident. So, when we presented to our spiritual master, His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, information about Jacques Monod when he was visiting France, and we told him how he wrote this book. He got his Nobel Prize in something else, in biophysics, but then he wrote this book, and he became famous writing that book. And we explained that this is a scientist, this is his name, and he wrote this book, and he says that everything happened by chance. So Srila Prabhupada, or Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, said, yes. He said, in the book, he tries to prove that everything happened by accident, but his book didn't happen by accident. Why does he put his name on the book? If he says everything happened by accident, then his book can happen by accident also. But no, he put his name on the book and claimed that he wrote the book, which he did. So how can you write a book that everything happens by accident, but your book didn't happen by accident? You see? So that's why I say scientists are the most irrational people in the world. There's a disconnect between their scientific work and the claims that they make. And the ultimate claim that they make is that there is no God, there's only the laws of nature, and the laws of nature came about by some kind of, by the force of gravity and many billions of years of trial and error, etc., etc. Well, that doesn't hold up. There's no proof of such a thing, because everything that is an organized system that we see today has intelligent people behind it. Like, for example, a Japanese robot or a Chinese robot. That's an imitation, and an imperfect imitation, of a human being. If you say that human beings came about by accident through a long process of trial and error, genetic mutation, etc., etc., then how come you can't have a robot, which is less than a human being, right? Happening by accident. No one in their right mind would ever say that the robot made in China or Japan happened by accident. It was produced by intelligent people. Now, if the imitation of the human being needed intelligent people to make it, but the human being, which is much more complicated, happened by accident, that's the type of disconnect, intellectual and rational disconnect, that the scientists have. Therefore, they're not real scientists, because you would have to be an honest person. Like Isaac Newton, he was an actual scientist. Isaac Newton said, "We have only begun to examine a few grains of sand in the vast ocean of knowledge." Now, there's an honest person. He realizes that whatever they know is nothing compared to what they're seeing in nature. And what they're seeing in nature is already been created, is already functioning perfectly, is already self-sustaining. It doesn't need outsourcing to maintain it, right? You don't need people in India and China and Malaysia to be on 24-hour call to maintain all these systems in nature. It's happening by itself. It's self-contained. So this is the difference between God, the perfect creator, and the Swiss watchmaker. The Swiss watchmaker can make a great watch, but that watch cannot reproduce itself. You need the Swiss watchmaker. Whereas Krishna can make a self-sustaining system that reproduces itself without anybody's maintenance. So there are many cycles in nature that prove the existence of a perfect creator. And I mentioned a few of them. There's a carbon cycle, there's a phosphorus cycle, there's a nitrogen cycle, there's also the menstrual cycle. All these are cycles that are created by Krishna. And they're self-sustaining. Okay, so here, this verse is saying the opposite of what people are trying to do. People are trying to find happiness outside of themselves. But actually, the real happiness exists within oneself. So if you look in the wrong place, will you find what you're looking for? Answer is no. If you're looking for happiness outside of yourself, you'll never find it. You'll only find the happiness within yourself. What is within us? Well, a doctor will say, well, you have a heart and a liver and a gallbladder and blood and urine and mucus and bile and marrow and bone. There's nothing happy about all that stuff. It's all rather disgusting, right? But that's not what he's talking about here in this verse. What he's talking about in this verse is that you will find Krishna within, or the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the Supreme Absolute Truth. Now, people say, well, wait a minute, so many doctors have dissected the human body and they never saw Krishna. Well, that doesn't mean that Krishna is not there. It just means that they didn't see it. Because when you use the blunt senses, your ability to see is very limited. Like, for example, if you're flying over the Pacific Ocean and you're on the and you're sitting next to the window of the plane, and you take your camera and you take a photo of the Pacific Ocean, how much of the Pacific Ocean will you see in the photo? How much of it? Almost zero. Almost zero, right? So that is the extent of what we're saying. When you see another person, how much of that person do you actually see? Very little. Very, very little. Our perception is very limited. In fact, when you get to hearing, there are animals that can hear much better than we do. They can hear vibrations, sound vibrations, that are much more, that we can't hear. And they also can perceive things that we don't perceive. Like, for example, many animals can perceive when there's going to be a earthquake. And we don't know. They can perceive if there's a tsunami coming. See, and there's scientific proof of that. So our senses of perception are very limited. And but one thing we know for sure, there's something in a living body that's not present in a dead body, and that is consciousness and life. And therefore, we cannot attribute it simply to chemicals, because we have all the chemicals, and you can put them together any way you want. You don't end up with a living being. And therefore, there's something more than matter that is animating the body with consciousness. And that's explained in the body, in the Bhagavad Gita, where Krishna explains to Arjuna in the 13th chapter. He says, 13th chapter, 3rd verse, Chetragyam chapimam api, Chetragyam chapimam vidi, sarvachetru bharata, chetra gayor gyanam, yajtat gyanam matam mama. And he says, O Arjuna, you should understand that I am also the knower in all bodies, and to understand this body and its knower is called knowledge. That is my opinion. Okay, so what does this verse say? In the purport, His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada explains, while discussing the subject of the body and the knower of the body, the soul and the supersoul, we shall find three different topics of study: the Lord, the living entity, and matter. In every field of activities, in every body, there are two souls, the individual soul and the supersoul. Because the supersoul is the plenary expansion of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, Krishna says, I am also the knower, but I am not the individual knower of the body, I am the super knower. I am present in every body as the Paramatma, or the supersoul. So now we know what we're looking for when we go inside. We're looking for the presence of God as the supersoul, and the presence of our own individual soul. So that is a source of tremendous happiness. Why? Because we're carrying God in our heart. We are actually a moving temple of God. Not only we, but every living entity is, including the ant, the elephant, the birds, the fish, and so forth. So now our vision of life is corrected through the words of the Bhagavad Gita. Something that we never could have realized on our own, we begin to realize by reading the Bhagavad Gita with faith. And now we understand the mystery of life. The mystery of life is we have an eternal relationship with God, independent of this body. This body, of course, is always changing, but independent of it, we are always accompanied by God. And that is our connection to universal knowledge. For example, if I can connect with Krishna, then all of a sudden I connect with all persons in the universe, because Krishna is present in the heart of everyone. And this is what happened 5,000 years ago. Sanjaya, the disciple of Vyasadeva, and he was sitting next to Dhritarashtra in Delhi, or Hastinapur. But he was telling him what was happening in real time in Kurukshetra. Now, how could he know and repeat exactly what Krishna was telling Arjuna in Kurukshetra? which is several hundred miles away from Hastinapur or Delhi, because he had connected with Krishna in his heart. And whatever Krishna was doing in Kurukshetra was revealed to him through his heart. Just like nowadays we're talking about people who are going to, as soon as they're born, they receive some kind of a chip that's put in their brain, and they can have instant internet in the brain, and it's coming. Well, fine, that is some kind of digital technology, but there's a higher technology that Sanjaya had, and it was not controlled by Google or not controlled by Microsoft. It was controlled by Krishna himself, and it was based on a higher technology that is part of what's called the fourth dimension. We live in 3 dimensions, and the 3 dimensions are limited. There's a fourth dimension that's unlimited, and in that fourth dimension there are occurrences that take place that defy nature, that defy the laws of nature, and they are eternal, they are infinite. So therefore a person can attain such internal happiness that's infinite, unending, and sustainable if they learn how to connect to Krishna. Now, the easiest way to connect to Krishna is through sound, because sound it penetrates everything. Sound vibration. For example, if a person is sleeping and a thief walks into their house, they can't see the person because they're sleeping. They can't taste the person because they're sleeping. They can't smell the person because they're sleeping. They can't touch the person because they're sleeping. But they can hear the person if that person makes noise, even though they're sleeping, and they can wake up. So hearing is the most sensitive of all the senses. And therefore, if we connect to Krishna through hearing, then at that point we can actually perceive the presence of the Lord in the heart. Now this hearing process is explained in depth in the 13th chapter, 26th verse, where it's described. This verse says, "Again, there are those who, although not conversant in spiritual knowledge, begin to worship the Supreme Person upon hearing about him from others. Because of their tendency to hear from authorities, they also transcend the path of birth and death." Okay, now, in the commentary by Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, he explains, this verse is particularly applicable to modern society because in modern society there is practically no education in spiritual matters. Some of the people may appear to be atheistic or agnostic or philosophical, but actually there's no knowledge of philosophy. As for the common man, if he is a good soul, then there is a chance for advancement by hearing. This hearing process is very important. Lord Chaitanya, who preached Krishna consciousness in the modern world, gave great stress to hearing because if the common man simply hears from authoritative sources, he can progress, especially according to Lord Chaitanya, if he hears the transcendental vibration Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. It is stated, therefore, that all men should take advantage of hearing from realized souls and gradually become able to understand everything. The worship of the Supreme Lord will then undoubtedly take place. Lord Chaitanya has said that in this age no one needs to change his position, but if one should give up the endeavor to understand the absolute truth by speculative reasoning. Okay, so he says no one should change his position, social position or work or whatever, but one should give up the endeavor to understand the absolute truth by speculative reasoning. So all modern science is based on speculation, because they're trying to see things or understand things that they can't see, so they speculate. Bohr speculated intelligently about atomic structure. Einstein and Planck and others speculated about waves, right? And then other scientists have speculated in other ways. And you have Hawking's that's talking all the time about black holes and things like that. Because they're trying to explain something they can't see and they can't experience, right? If you go near a black hole, you'll get sucked into the black hole, and that's the last time they see you, right? And they speculate about Mars. They speculate about the moon because they've never been to these places. They can observe them somewhat from a distance. It's just like observing the Pacific Ocean from the window of your airplane. How much of it can you see? You know, even if you have a strong telescope, how much can you actually see on Mars or the moon or any of these planets? You don't actually see anything. Therefore, unless you can go there, you will never really know what the place is like. But many of these places, if you go there, you can't stay there because the body is not made for that atmosphere. So there are many obstacles to our seeing. But if we learn to see Krishna within our heart, and that is possible, then our power of perception becomes much more evolved and developed. And we begin to see Krishna by hearing, not actually by seeing. So here it says, it is stated therefore that all men should take advantage of hearing from realized souls and gradually become able to understand everything. The worship of the Supreme Lord will then undoubtedly take place. Lord Chaitanya has said that in this age, no one needs to change his position, but one should give up the endeavor to understand absolute truth by speculative reasoning. One should learn to become the servant of those who are in knowledge of the Supreme Lord. If one is fortunate enough to take shelter of a pure devotee, hear from him about self-realization, and follow in his footsteps, one will be gradually elevated to the position of a pure devotee. In this verse, particularly, the process of hearing is strongly recommended, and this is very appropriate. Although the common man is often not as capable as so-called philosophers, faithful hearing from an authoritative person will help one transcend this material existence and go back to Godhead, back to home. So faithful hearing is the key. What is faithful hearing? That is, at least theoretically understand that Krishna is God. Then when you read and hear Bhagavad Gita, it'll make sense. But if you think that Krishna is just like any other ordinary man, just a little bit extraordinary in some ways, but his position is achievable if I do meditation or if I do yoga, if I do this or I do that, then you'll never understand Bhagavad Gita. It's just like if someone's trying to understand your mother, but they never met your mother. So how much are they going to understand? They're not going to really understand that much, you see. So Krishna says, Naham prakasa sarvasa yogamaya samavritaha mudoyam nabijananti. He says that I am never manifest to the unintelligent and atheistic persons. Lokomam ajam avyayam. He says, I am never manifest to the foolish and unintelligent. For them I am covered by my internal potency, and therefore they do not know that I am unborn and infallible. So Krishna reserves the right to reveal himself. And if a person becomes a faithful listener to Krishna's Bhagavad Gita, then Krishna reveals himself to the devotee. But if they're listening in a cursory way, not with faith that Krishna is God, but rather they're thinking, oh, well, I can also emulate Krishna. I can just do some yoga. He's actually an ordinary man, and is not much better than me. I can achieve that same position of being God. Then one will never understand anything. So here, Krishna is hidden from the eyes of human beings by his internal potency, and this is explained in this verse of Bhagavad Gita as well as in the Ishopanishad. Hiranmayana patrena satyasya pihitam mukham tattvam pusam apavrinu satyadharmaya drishtaye. O my Lord, you are the maintainer of the entire universe, and devotional service to you is the highest religious principle. Therefore, I pray that you will also maintain me. Your transcendental form is covered by the Yogamaya, the brilliant effulgence emanating from your body. This Brahmajyoti is the covering of the internal potency. May you kindly remove this glowing effulgence that impedes my seeing your Satchitananda form, your eternal form of bliss and knowledge. So this is the prayer of the 15th mantra, the Ishopanishad. Krishna, we are covered by the material energy, or Maya. Even if we free ourselves from that covering, we still cannot see Krishna because he is covered by his internal potency called Yogamaya, or this brilliant effulgence. However, by developing love for Krishna, he removes that curtain of light, and then we can see his beautiful face and beautiful form. So we have a long way to go when it comes to realizing the absolute truth. There are many ways to speculate, but there's only one way to approach Krishna. That is explained in the 11th chapter, 54th verse. Bhaktya tvananyaya sakya aham evam vidururjana gyatam jastam chitatvena pavestam cha parantapa. Krishna says in the 11th chapter, 54th verse, O Arjuna, I can only be understood by pure devotion. Bhaktya tvananyaya sakya. By undivided devotional service can I be understood as I am, standing before you, and can thus be seen directly. Only in this way can you enter into the mysteries of my understanding. So now we understand why Krishna tells Arjuna in the 5th chapter, 18th verse, that true happiness is within. Because if we approach Krishna with devotion and love, then he reveals himself to us from within. And we don't have to look anywhere else. One whose happiness is within, who is active and rejoices within, and whose aim is inward, is actually the perfect mystic. He is liberated in the Supreme, and ultimately he attains the Supreme. So, in order to be able to see Krishna within, we have to be free from the dualities without. In the material world, we're constantly harceled or constantly agitated by dualities. Love and hate, happiness and distress, riches and poverty, peace and war, heat and cold, health and sickness, and so forth. These are all dualities. These dualities confuse us, bewilder us, and put us in a state of mental agitation. But it's possible to rise above all of these dualities. That's why Krishna recommends Bhaktya Tvananyaya Sakya, undivided devotional service. Then all of our energy is used to please the Lord. Then we rise above dualities. When we're not sure what the ultimate goal of life is, then we're bothered by dualities. But when we're convinced that what the ultimate goal of life is, savai pumsa paro dharmo yato bhaktira hoksuje haitukiya pratyata yayatma suprasiddhati. In the Sukadeva Goswami says in the Srimad Bhagavatam, first canto, second chapter, that the perfection, savai pumsa parodharma, of parodharmas, the superior dharma of the living entity, is to attain pure love for God. And that love is uninterrupted and unmotivated. In other words, there's no material purpose to achieve, and there's no downtime. It's uninterrupted and unmotivated. So that can only be attained by having one objective in life, and that is to please the Lord. This is called samsiddhir haritoshanam. That is, the highest perfection of life is to please Lord Hari. Hari is a name of Krishna, which means the Lord that takes away all the misery of the living entity. So if we learn to use our senses to please the senses of Krishna, then Krishna takes special interest in us and reveals to us innate knowledge that's in our heart of our eternal relationship with Him. This is explained in the 10th chapter of Bhagavad Gita. Tesam ivanukam partam aham agyanamam tama nasayami atmabhavastu jnana dipena bhasvato. Krishna says, I, dwelling within the heart of the living entity, who is dedicated to me in devotion, light up with the lamp of knowledge the darkness born of ignorance. So this light of knowledge is called Jnana Deepa, the light or Deepa of Jnana or knowledge. And what is knowledge? There's Jnana and Vijnana. Jnana means understanding the difference between the temporary material body and the eternal soul, animating the body with consciousness. And Vijnana means understanding that the relationship between the individual soul and the super soul, or Krishna as Paramatma within the heart. And then on the next level, understanding that the Paramatma, the individual soul, the entire material creation, all incarnations and expansions of God come originally from Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Ete cham sakkalak pumsa Krishnastu Bhagavan Swayam Indra Arivyu Kalam Lokam Mridayanti Yuge Yuge. So Sukadeva Goswami again is telling Maharaj Parikshit that that Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Ete cham sapara Krishna, that He is the origin of all incarnations and of everything. Or as Krishna says Himself in the 15th chapter, Yomam Ajam Asamoda Janati Purushottamaha Sarvavit Bhajate Mam Sarva Bhavina Bharata. He says, 15th chapter, verse number 19, one who knows me without any doubt to be the Supreme Personality of Godhead is the knower of everything. He therefore engages himself in full devotional service to me, O Arjuna. So this is one of the quintessential verses of the Bhagavad Gita. And in the purport, His Divine Grace Bhaktivedanta Prabhupada says, there are many philosophical speculations about the constitutional position of the living entities and the Supreme Absolute Truth. Now in this verse, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Krishna, clearly explains that anyone who knows Him to be the Supreme Person is actually the knower of everything. The imperfect knower goes on simply speculating about the Absolute Truth, but the perfect knower, without wasting his valuable time, engages directly in Krishna consciousness or the devotional service to the Supreme Lord. Throughout the whole of Bhagavad Gita, this fact is being stressed at every step. And still there are so many stubborn commentators on Bhagavad Gita who consider the Supreme Absolute Truth and the living entities to be one and the same. So, these are the people that say that Atma becomes Paramatma at one stage. Now that is complete nonsense. The individual Atma, or the individual soul, never becomes Paramatma. How do we know that? If we, first of all, if we were Paramatma before, or we were this God before, how is it that we fell into illusion? If we were God and we fell into illusion, that means that illusion, or Maya, is greater than God, because it was able to overcome us. So God is never subject to his creative energy. He creates it. He controls it, so that he's not subject to it. But we're subject to it. So that's the proof that we're not God. The fact that we're in illusion right now, the fact that we're spinning our wheels in the material world, birth, old age, disease, and death, rebirth, old age, disease, and death, just spinning our wheels in the material world from one body to another, and we're under the influence of the modes of material nature, especially passion and ignorance. All this is indicative of the fact that we're controlled. We're not the controller. The controller, or Supreme Ishvara, is Krishna, and he's never under the control of material nature. He controls it. Vyasadeva actually saw this. Vyasadeva actually saw Krishna, and behind Krishna he saw Maya Devi. And this is correctly understood. It's also said in the Bhagavad Gita, Shasti Stati Pralaya Sadhava Saktirika Chayeva Yasya Bhuvanayani Vibharti Durga Ichana Rupam Apiyasya Chichestatesa Govindam Adipurusham Tamaham Bhajami. Maya is compared to, is described as Chayeva, a shadow. A shadow has no independence. So, for example, I can see the shadow of my hand right now because there's lights above my hand, but the shadow only moves when my hand moves. It doesn't move independent of my hand. So Maya is considered the Chayeva in Sanskrit, which means the shadow. And she only moves like a puppet under the control of the Lord. Now, what is the purpose of Maya Devi, or Durga Mata? She is the superintendent of the universal prison. Just like when Sammamish city was built or started in, I think it was 1999 or 98, the first thing they did was they rented a place down nearby the Safeway for City Hall, right? And in that rented space, they also had a jail. Now, why did they have a jail? Right? Because they know there's always going to be some people who are going to break the law. Even though no people, when they first started the city, no one was a criminal at that time, right? They just started the city. But soon after they started the city, they started using the jail. Some people started breaking the law. So whenever they build a new city, they also build a jail. And therefore, why is that? Because people have limited free will. Every human being has limited free will. What is it limited to? We can either choose to follow Krishna's instructions or choose not to follow them. So the persons that choose not to follow Krishna's instructions, they're put in the jail. The jail is called Martya Loka, the world of death, rebirth, old age, disease, death, rebirth, and so forth. This is a jail, and the jail is localized as the material body, which is subject to the laws of material nature. Our soul is not subject to the laws of material nature. Our soul is eternal. But when we become illusioned, we identify with the body rather than the soul, and then whatever happens to the body affects us. When you detach yourself from the body and identify with the soul, then whatever happens to the body does not disturb you. Is this possible? Yes, it is possible. This is what the yogis do. But we're not capable of doing as they do. We can't go up into a cave in the Himalayas by ourselves and just meditate. Therefore, Lord Chaitanya came 500 years ago, and he gave a very simple and easy process to attain that same state of neutrality, or not being affected by the body and the laws of nature, and especially the three modes of nature: goodness, passion, and ignorance. Goodness, passion, and ignorance are like three strings that are controlling the puppet, us, all living entities. We're being controlled by these three modes. And but we can rise above the effect of these three modes. Mam chayovi bicharina bhakti yogena sevate sagunam samatityaitan brahma bhuyaya kalpate. This is explained in the 14th chapter and 26th verse, which says, one who engages in full devotional service, unfailing in all circumstances, at once transcends the modes of material nature, and thus comes to the spiritual level above the influence of the modes of material nature. So, full engagement in service of the Lord. Now, someone would say, well, how can I be fully engaged? I have to work, I got to take care of my family, I have to do this, I have to do that. Well, yes, you may have all those social duties, but you can take up chanting Hare Krishna, at least coming to the temple once a day, having darshan of the deities, bowing down to them, hearing Bhagavad Gita, chanting Hare Krishna, having some prasadam, and using your time, energy, and money in Krishna's service. Then, although you're doing all these other things, your mind is focused on one goal. Savai pumsa paro dharmo yato bhakti rahoksuje. Hare Krishna. Shri Shri Radha Nilamadhava ki jai. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Shrimati Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namini Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pacharine Nilvisesa Sunyavadi Paskatya Desatarine. Then, by this mental culture of Krishna consciousness, one rises above all the disturbances of material life. The disturbances are there, but you are not disturbed. Why? Because you have an ultimate goal of life. That goal of life eliminates confusion by the dualities of life. So this is explained in Bhagavad Gita, 2nd chapter, 66th verse, Nasti buddhir ayuktasya nacha yuktasya bhavana nacha bhavya tak santira santasya kutas sukam. This verse says, one who is not connected with the Supreme Lord in Krishna consciousness can have neither transcendental intelligence nor a steady mind, without which there's no possibility of peace. And how can there be any happiness without peace? So mental disturbance is due to not having a substantive, real, and sincere connection to Krishna. Once we establish that connection through devotional service, through chanting, through darshan, through prasadam, through service, then we have a final goal in life. That eliminates all dualities. Every decision we make from that point on is in terms of reaching our final goal. So, for example, someone could say, well, I live in Sammamish, but maybe I should live in India. But the question is, you should make a decision based on reaching that final goal of being Krishna conscious, of developing pure love for Krishna. So, if it's more favorable to stay in Sammamish because of the proximity to the temple, because of the association one may receive in the temple, because of the opportunity to serve in the temple, and rather than going back to India where you might have to travel through a lot of traffic and bottlenecks here and there, and all different issues that might be there because of overpopulation, whatever, then it's easier to be Krishna conscious here. Therefore, that solves the problem. Because you make every decision in terms of that final goal. The final goal is to attain pure love of Krishna. So disturbance of the mind is due to want of an ultimate goal. But when one is certain that Krishna is the ultimate goal, and he's the proprietor, he's the enjoyer and the friend of everyone and everything, then one can, with a steady mind, bring about peace. Therefore, one who is engaged without a relationship with Krishna is certainly always in distress and is without peace. However much he or she may make a show of peace and spiritual advancement in life, Krishna consciousness is a self-manifested, peaceful condition which can be achieved only in relationship with the Lord. So this is a very important verse, 2nd chapter, 66th verse, Nasti Buddhir Ayuktasya, which says, Na asti, without a real connection to the Supreme Lord in Krishna consciousness, Na asti Buddhir Ayuktasya, Nacha Yuktasya Bhavana, one can have neither transcendental intelligence nor a steady mind. Not Chababhyantak Santir, and without which, without steady intelligence and a steady mind, there's no possibility of peace. Asantasya kutasakam, and how can there be any happiness without peace of mind? Okay, so we started with the verse, the 5th chapter, of finding happiness within, rather than looking for happiness without. One whose happiness is within, who is active and rejoices within, and whose aim is inward, is actually the perfect mystic. He or she is liberated in the Supreme and ultimately attains the Supreme. And then we came through many different verses to one who is not connected with the Supreme in Krishna consciousness can have neither transcendental intelligence nor a steady mind, without which there is no possibility of peace. And how can there be any happiness without peace? Then one last verse in the 4th chapter, Ajnas chasanadanasya samsayatma vinasyati nayam lokusti na paro na sukham na paramgatim. This verse says that 4th chapter, 40th verse. But the ignorant and faithless persons who doubt the revealed scriptures do not attain God consciousness. They fall down. For the doubting soul, there is happiness neither in this world nor the next. So that is a dilemma in which you don't want to end up in. Nayam lokosti na paro, na sukham na param siddhim. You don't want to end up, na sukham samsayatmanaha. You don't want to end up not being happy in this world nor the next world. Therefore, one should develop faith and overcome and eliminate all doubts about one's relationship to Krishna, and work within that relationship, cultivate it like you cultivate a garden, and then enjoy the fruits of that relationship, which is peace and happiness and transcendental knowledge and a steady mind. Hare Krishna. Are there any questions? Any questions? Comments? No questions, no answers. Haribol. Thank you.